Power Hour Friday, where we talk about health and fitness, travel, cars, gear, men's journal coverage, pretty much anything we really want to talk about that's pertinent to us, except for fashion. I think this is the wrong group. We've substantiated that, but also this is your opportunity to submit any questions for John Welborn. Again, NFL power athlete, CEO and founder. We got Sean Apperson, founder of Archetype Boxing, former MMA fighter, and then Dr. Kirk Parsley, retired Navy SEAL and human performance doctor. I think you said it before. If you got a broken arm, don't come to him. If you want to up your accelerate your performance, then he's the guy. But again, submit your questions through any of the platforms, whatever platform you're watching, and we'll get to it. With that, happy St. Patty's Day.
Happy St. Patrick's Day.
You guys got anything planned?
Too much, just avoiding the calamity, I guess. Avoiding all the downtown scene. That should be crazy.
Well, we also have South by Southwest. Yeah. A lot of the listeners don't know that, and that's I think Jordan and I have taken off the last few South by Southwest, but they said this one is actually back to where it was pre-COVID.
I was there Saturday, so Nick Harderwick, who played center for the Chargers, he was in town speaking for on a panel about brain health. So I went out to support him, and it was actually really interesting because he, obviously 11 years in the NFL, had brain damage or some form of brain damage. And what this group does is they map the brain through brain waves, and then they use magnets to kind of rebalance it. And he's felt much better for it. So he was speaking in support of them.
Long-term benefits, or is it, you've got to?
So he had it done in 2017, 2018. And he made a great point. He's like, I just didn't feel right. And they did the treatments with the magnets. And he said he feels night and day better. So he was there speaking on their behalf.
And conclusive data on the brain through MRIs, it shows certain areas like.
Well, their research has been over the last couple of years, but actually I was the ace in the hole for them. So come to find out that as they were speaking and presenting on it, the information sounded very familiar to me. So as I went up and I met the doctor, I'm like, this sounds a ton like a group in Newport called the Brain Research Center. 2013, a bunch of SEALs kept coming up to Newport, and they were in a DOD study that was analyzing brain waves to see if they could figure out if there was one specific brain for the SEALs. So when they went into selection, they could pre-select people. So the guys came up and they were in this DOD study. I went with them and I met the doctor. He put me into the study and scanned my brain. So as I'm talking, the guy's like, "We're the Brain Research Center." So the next day I went to get scanned, and he pulled up my scan from 10 years ago.
No kidding.
And the doctor was like, "This is unbelievable. We've never had somebody 10 years apart."
In terms of bringing them back to see.
Yeah. So he's like, this technology that we have today didn't exist when you had it done 10 years ago in terms of the magnets, but the scans are identical. So the doctor was like, "I'm so excited. We've never seen this." So they scan my brain, bring the results up. He overlays them and he looks and goes, "Is this a mistake?" And I get a little nervous, and the guy's like, "No, this is how it came out." And I'm like, "Why? What does it look?" He's like, "Well, based on the scan, you somehow figured out over the last 10 years on how to actually de-age your brain, and your peak is more extreme and narrower, which means that you made your brain more efficient and you made yourself smarter in the last 10 years. And the doctor looks at me and he's like, "It's pretty much the holy grail, what we've searched for."
Yeah. Our community's been doing it for a long time, like you said. And I think like a lot of things out there, there's definitely utility to it, but nobody knows the exact protocol yet. Nobody knows exactly what areas to focus on and how long to do it and how frequently to do it. What's the total number of treatments? What's the interval between treatments? All that they're still trying to figure out. Very similar to hyperbarics.
Well,
hyperbarics works really well for a lot of stuff, but we don't really know the exact ideal treatment yet.
But what
you can get psychiatric disorders if it's done wrong, right?
On the magnet thing.
On the magnets.
So what was crazy is the doctor didn't recommend any magnets for me. So, and also he had heat maps from Sunday, but also from 10 years ago. And when I retired, and this was through the Amen study, is actually this the way I found it, was this part of my brain was damaged, obviously from fucking playing left guard and hitting your head for 10 years. And then the scan had that heat map lit up. The scan they did on Sunday, no damage was noticeable. So the doc's like, not only did you somehow mitigate damage, but you actually reversed any of the brain damage from playing 10 years in the
But we
NFL.
know you've done a lot. I mean,
Yeah,
like
we have.
you and I know
You've done the
you've
O2
done
I
a
know
lot
exactly what I've done.
You've done
Yeah.
a lot of stuff and been very proactive with it, and you're further and further away from the trauma.
Yeah.
Right. So decreasing neuroinflammation is the key to recapturing your brain, right? But then
But-
also a lot of the peptides and stuff you're doing are increasing
and the hyperbarics.
and the hyperbarics, and that's all helping your brain recover.
Sure.
So how much of it is that? And how much is your, Wolverine genetics, and like who knows? But yeah, I mean, there's definitely validity to it, man.
So I called Dr. Joe, and I was talking, and he's underwater.
Yeah.
So Dr. Joe DeRudy, who's like the expert.
Detur.
Detur. I just call him Joe Dirt.
Yeah.
He's like the expert on hyperbarics, and Doc brought him on. He was on our podcast, and he's still to this day might be my favorite guest, other than you.
Yeah.
And you guys, present company.
Okay,
Of course.
He is hilarious, and he calls me. He's like, "Hey, I'm underwater," and he's from like Long Island, New York, or so he's got this,
the accent.
the accent.
The
And he's-
king of the one-line
Yeah.
zingers too, man. Like,
Yeah, he's like, "I'm underwater for 100 days. I'm shitting in a bucket," and
I'm actually going out there next month.
so we were talking about it, and he's like, he's like, "We don't know what's going," and he's always so like stoked when I talk to him. It's always great to see him, but yeah, we had a lot of fun. But yeah, I talked to him the other night, and he's like, "Well, dude, you know what? Like, we've been talking about it. Like, the hyperbarics is a huge player."
Well, and he has some amazing results with COVID. They're not big enough for anybody, but the long COVID, I mean, he had people who were completely dysfunctional, hyperbarics for 2 weeks, and they're totally normal. Like, he had a woman who literally couldn't talk.
10 sessions.
And then 10 sessions, she comes out and everybody's like, "We want you to quit talking," because she was just a total flibberty gibbet after that, So hyperbarics is legit. I think it's one of the biggest things coming down the road.
I just realized we don't have anyone in this crew that hasn't been subjected to brain trauma. Fighters, NFL, SEALs.
Nothing.
Well,
Yeah, this
well,
is
the
probably is the
exciting
level of
thing-
conversation that
Well,
people are
the
gonna get.
exciting thing is, and this is what the doctor said, like, now, I mean, obviously it's in a 1 of 1 and 1, but he's like, this legitimately shows that we can fix brain trauma.
Right.
Mhm.
And he's like, this is incredible, because we didn't have 10 years of data to support this.
Right.
So he's like, anybody says like, "Oh, I got brain damage, I can't fix it. He's like, there's a protocol for it.
Have they seen? Well, I know it's difficult to test, but reverse on CT
Well, so the only way they know CTE is
post
death.
death,
And then what
Yeah,
they
yeah.
have to do is slice the brain into
Mhm.
like little pieces in this. And there's a bunch of people that claim to have some tests and some things to be able to do it. But
Not
I mean,
conclusive
at
yet.
the end of the day, I don't care about CTE. I
You care about your
like,
function.
I care about my function.
Yeah.
Like, I could have all the CT in the world, and if I'm normal and my function, everything looks great, like, and you find it once, I'm dead. Now, if you get to the point
I'm
where
dead.
where I'm putting a gun in my chest and I'm shooting myself in the heart and leaving a note,
Yeah.
like, "Look at
Yeah,
my
yeah, yeah.
brain,"
Yep.
which, is Junior Seau and those guys.
Well, there's also
well,
SEAL doing
and
the same
yeah,
thing, right?
well, the SEALs have started to do that, but we don't have CTE, right? Because we do have concussion, generalized mechanical concussions, but they're nowhere near like what this guy did, right?
Or,
Like that
I'm
was,
assuming
or
fighters
they're
as well.
fighters the same
Yeah,
way,
yeah,
like
yeah.
pugilists, NFL guys, like they're hitting their concussive blows. Ours are all blast, so ours are all shear force, because as the blast goes through the skull, everything of different densities moves at a different rate, and so it shears the durasac from the brain, it shears the arteries and nerves from the brain, it shears the white matter from the gray matter, shears the gray matter from the the vesicles with the fluid in it, and so the entire brain gets damaged equally, and so that you can see all these beta amyloid plaques like all around the brain, where CT is very focal. Is like,
Mhm.
if you do this all the time, it looks like this. And for us, it's just like the whole brain's a disaster area.
I remember when I
Because
transitioned out.
Larkin was the first one who got,
Committed suicide?
his father's a big advocate. His father was
Yeah.
a team guy. He's been pushing this. I actually went to a Stanford run symposium on this, and they put up all these brains, all these histologies. So look through a microscope at region of the brain, and I want to say they put up 12 cases, and 8 of them were SEALs.
Or
And so
special operations. Yeah,
no,
yeah, yeah.
they were actually
Actual
actually
SEALs,
SEAls.
but
But there were
yeah.
a few other special operation guys, and then there were some people who weren't involved with the military whatsoever. but that's definitely its own thing. But I think in my clinical experience, I think it's easier to fix than CTE, even though it's taking up the whole brain.
It's just you've got to have the time. You want to do the hyperbaric chamber. It's a time matter,
Dude,
man.
it was
when guys have to
it was
put
40
food on the table.
sessions.
It's
It's
Dude,
time,
it was 40
expense,
sessions,
over
but
the course of what,
8 weeks.
8 weeks. So I
Monday
went
through
5
Friday.
times a day or 5 times a week.
and then
But-
you stopped.
Well, it was 40 sessions is the protocol.
Yeah.
So the only protocol that they've ever tested was through the Navy, and they did 40 sessions over the course of 8
But
weeks.
I understand some symptoms go into remission, but once you stop,
No, so at about 20, I noticed like a huge change.
gotta do
And
this.
then when I did the 40, I didn't necessarily notice a huge deal, other than my eyesight got so good that like it was to the point where we were driving and my wife's like, I'm reading something, and she's like, what are you even looking at? Like it was like 2010. Like what I could, I mean, it was unreal. And then Doc had the exact opposite, where his eyesight got worse to the point where he felt like he was like legally blind.
That's no, that's God and karma.
No,
Uh,
so what it is
punishing him.
saturation of oxygen in the eyeball probably made mine more round. They probably made Doc's
It
more
changes,
thin.
it changes the shape of the eyeball because you have oxygen bubbles in the aqueous humor of the eye. So you change the shape, and so your lens gets further away from the retina. So if that's your visual problem, if the visual problem is your eye shaped that way to where it's too close, well, then you make it better. My visual problem is probably the opposite. So it got way worse.
Well, Sean,
I like told him, I was like, I got like fucking X-ray vision. This is crazy. And Doc's like, I can't even see walking around my house. I'm like a mole.
I'm sure you're probably agreeing. We were talking about St. Patty's Day, and these guys went right into fucking brain trauma.
Yeah, I know.
It
Yeah.
took off script, but
If you guys have any good St.
Irish
Patrick stories,
alcohol.
so one of my favorite ones was when I was a rookie in the NFL.
It should be noted that John's the only one wearing
Yeah.
green.
So we take St. Patrick's Day very seriously in my house. When I was a kid, obviously coming from Irish background, green milk, green oatmeal, green pancakes. We like always growing up, like every St. Patrick's Day, we always had green stuff.
Eggs and ham.
And then when I got a little bit older, obviously we go out in college. My parents met at a bar called the Buena Vista in San Francisco, where they allegedly invented the Irish coffee. So when I went to Berkeley, my parents used to come up, and St. Patrick's Day was always a big deal. When I went to the Philadelphia Eagles, I got hurt that first year, obviously, and I had to stay. So our assistant strength coach, Tom Kanabe, was like, he's from Scranton, PA. And there's a tradition in Scranton called First Beer, where you go get in line an hour before the bar opens. And then you wait in line and you have like your first couple drinks and you get bombed before you go to work. So we show up. He's like, hey, you're meeting me. So downtown Philly, Finnegan's Wake, this like bar, probably it's about this size, like, people cramming in there to get their first beer. We lined up at 5 a.m. They didn't open until 6. We were probably 50 deep. And then we like basically get in there and we just ordered everything. And then all of a sudden Kanabe's like, hey, I'm going to the bathroom. And he basically dark mans me, like just fucking leaves. And so I'm in this bar.
Irish goodbye.
Yeah. Like just leaves. Like, I don't know where he went, like gone. So I'm at the bar, like drinking, waiting for him to come back for, I don't know, 2 hours.
Mhm.
And then I go looking for him. Can't find him. Don't know where he is. At this point, I'm like obliterated. Get in the cab, go home. And then from that point on, it's been my tradition, broken this year because I had the fighter guys this morning, but we'll find a bar, whatever the first one in the city opens, and we get there, we get the first drink. And part of my rule is,
So that's why you said you're going to start at 7 a.m.
yeah. So
Gotcha.
it's the but the joke is, I'm undefeated on St. Patrick's Day. I've been out many times, and we've thrown bouncers out of their own bar. We've been in numerous fights. I've never been thrown out. I've never been taken down, and I've never lost. And I'm basically undefeated on St. Patrick's Day.
I think that's a record you should just retire from.
When we go out,
Yeah.
I tell everybody I'm undefeated on St. Patrick's Day. You have to keep this going. So if something goes down,
You take the hit.
we are going to literally like we
Don't mess with
protect
my
this.
record. Yeah.
We protect this. So I was with my brothers in Newport, and we were at the Shamrock, which is our like local bar. And we came in, obviously, first drink. My brothers went to work. They came back. I was still there. They cut out. And I just went and told the bouncers, I'm like, hey, here's the deal. Whatever trouble happens, just either leave it alone or I'm going to throw you out of the bar. And the dude was like, well, and I just threw the dude out and shut the door and locked it. And Dugan, who's the owner, knows this, is like, good job. The guy like had to walk back around. He's like, sorry, won't be any more problems.
You bounced,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
St. Patty's Day must have been unruly.
I hate St. Patrick's Day still to this day. And just because of all the things that John was just talking about, it's a nightmare for a doorman and just drunk people everywhere and starting trouble. And especially in Hollywood, because it's a place when people drink, they haven't had enough, real life situations where they.
What
pay
bars you work at
consequences.
in Hollywood?
So I was at a few. So Las Palmas has the Rock Bar,
Yeah.
which I was at, which was Tommy Lee, Dave Navarro, and that was 2005.
Dude, I have been there. I've been to Rock Bar.
Yeah. So Rock Bar was managed by a DJ from New Zealand, and he had no idea how to run a bar.
Nice.
So he just kind of gave me full reign at the front. So I hired a bunch of jiu-jitsu guys. And when there was trouble, he's like, that guy's got to go. And we just tackle him and like choke him unconscious and then drag him out. There was no like, we didn't like, hey, can I see your ID and take you out? Like we literally just like attack people when they had to leave and we drag them out. So
there's some liability issues there.
Yeah, but this is Rock Bar.
Well, you know what? Yeah, they don't want to be undefeated on St. Patrick's Day either.
Yeah.
So
here's the thing about drunk people. One, I do remember St. Patty's. I mean, you were stationed in San Diego. Gas lamp went off. But something about drunk guys, especially with no fighting background or defense background, they always pick the biggest guy in the bar. We used to have it in one. Always look at the ears. Yeah. That is the first thing you look at. Look at the guy's ears on the other side of the aisle. But we had a guy, JJ. I don't know if you know JJ, played football at UT, Navy SEAL, massive dude, about 6'4", 275. Lucky he made it through buds. That the guy could run that fast, but he was exceptional. Every time we would go out, no matter, and we travel all over the place for training. He conducted himself well, but there would be some drunk fraternity kid, and it's like they found the guy who played college football, and they're like, "Hey, me."
You know what's so weird about that is when I was in college, and I showed up at college, I was probably like 6'4", 250. There was a weird time there where like I used to have dudes like that. And then all of a sudden, as I got like closer to 300 pounds, it was like 290, 300, 305, 310. Then all of a sudden you get to the point where like nobody ever even like says shit to you.
Interesting.
So like I got kind of over the threshold where like nobody went to pick a fight for me anymore.
You look like livestock at some point.
Yeah. Just like, they're just like, that guy
bull.
Just, it's a good rule of thumb. Just don't fight. Nobody's going to win out in the, in public. Someone's going to lose.
Bar fights are so damn stupid.
Oh,
you have no idea who they're with, what weapons they have, if they're going to run you over when you get outside the bar, like whatever.
Probably the nastiest bar fight I ever saw involved a dude basically like, every time I see any of the video of the slap fights, it was basically the equivalent. The guy open hand cupped his hand, open hand slapped the dude on the ear, and exploded the guy's eardrum, and the guy fell like a ton of bricks to the point where every time I see those slap fights, I have like a PTSD moment where I like remember that dude, and the guy was like pretty good shape, and the other guy, I mean, knew what he was doing, completely rotated, got like his whole shoulder like a hook, cupped his hand, and I saw it happening, and he literally covered the dude's ear, and the guy here, and you heard the sound. It was like a pop and a slap and like a thud, and the thud was the guy hitting the ground, and he was unconscious, and there was blood coming out of his ear, and I remember thinking like, oh God, like that's probably the most vicious shot I've ever seen. Like, I'm sure you've seen that move.
Those slap contests have to have like some sort of self-selection IQ level to that.
But
like you're just going to stand there and let
you were just at the
somebody hit
Arnold
you?
Classic. Yeah. Did they do it this year? I saw they did it last year.
No, I think they didn't do it because of the liability issue. Because
it was Jake Paul and Arnold promoted it.
Well, I would like to slap Jake Paul. I think it'd be a fun one. I wonder if there was like a deal.
You want to get in the ring with him?
I'd get in the ring with him.
I
bet you I would like but I'll tell you this, he can fight.
Oh yeah.
I mean, he's like, I don't know if he's going to go like, fight, fucking win a world title, but that dude can fight.
No, I've been impressed, man.
Yeah. I mean, but I think I forgot who it was. Maybe it was Arash or somebody when we were doing some collar ties in jits, and he slapped me in the ear, and like I took a step back, and I'm like, I'm good. I'll get you on the next one, dude.
We'll see if Jake Paul could fight with water testing.
You think he's juiced up? He's like 25 years old, dude. I'm not impressed by like a 23, 24, 25-year-old kid in good shape.
Yeah,
there's no need for
he's got that trap ratio, trap chest kind of shoulder ratio that looks hormonally enhanced.
Whatever you say about Jake Paul, the guy's good at media.
Oh yeah,
He's built it.
He's a
You
promoter.
got to
Yeah.
hand it to him.
Yeah.
Dude, I love the fact that he was going back with Dana White, and he just went and bought a seat on their board.
I didn't know that.
So that, you know how they were like bickering back and forth.
Yes.
Whatever the parent company is for the UFC, he bought so much stock that he got a board seat.
Yeah, and I know the parent company. It'll come to me.
Yeah.
It starts with an E.
And did you notice their whole little bickering just kind of ended?
Oh yeah, it's got it.
Yeah.
Same face.
Yeah.
Well, let's get to some men's journal updates. Throw that out. First one. I thought this one was pretty good. A complete guide to never getting invited hiking again. And when I saw this, I thought of pretty much every girl I've ever dated and taken into nature, and my wife. So first one is bring food you don't like and ask people for their food. Don't bring enough water. We've all seen that.
No.
But even dudes that are trained to go out into the field would violate some of these. Remember, no one knows as much as you do. It's the smartest man on the mountain.
Yeah.
Wander off the trail by yourself. You know who I think of with that one? Jim Wigginton. We on the 777, we had the 73-year-old who's a former Marine, the guy private equity, done very well for himself. He has multiple world records. But Jim would just take, and he had a hernia. He's got a hernia before we go to Antarctica, doesn't tell anyone, and would just like take off, and everyone would be like, we ordered a Where's Waldo outfit that was supposed to meet us in Miami. We're going to make him wear that. But wear your brand new shoes or pack without breaking them in.
Yeah. And then bitch about your blisters.
Yeah.
And then lastly, complain about your pain. So I asked my wife to marry me at Skogafoss, which is the big waterfall in Iceland.
Oh, wow.
And then we drove there's a Black Pebble Beach. And this was my great SEAL tactical skills. She's like, how far do you think that walk is from the highway to the actual beach? I'm like, that's probably like half a mile. And it was like 3 miles in like soft pebble. And she was wearing these moon boots. Have you ever seen moon boots?
Oh.
They're not hiking boots. They're like luxury.
Yeah.
I'm going to sit on the ski slope and drink. And she had these white pants on. I mean, she knew what was coming. So she dressed because she knew there was going to be a fly on the wall photographer, which I'd set up. And it took probably about an hour and a half to get to the beach. And then, she's got a brand new ring. And then an hour and a half back, and she wouldn't even talk to me. And we got in the car and we just took off. But interesting.
Napoleon Dynamite wore them.
Oh,
Did he?
like those type of like the ski boots that like little kids wear.
With it's got the fur on
Yeah.
the top.
Oh,
Yeah. Like the little kids.
Yeah, like the Buck Rogers.
Aspen, Deer Valley, Park City.
I got in a good first big fight with my now wife on the cables at Half Dome after a long hike, which we started. It was like Labor Day. We had no pass. You have to have like a lottery pass to go up that. So we were like on the way. The ranger comes by, asks us for our pass. We don't have them. It's like a huge fine. It was like $300 each or something. He felt bad for us. Ended up giving us the pass to go up the cables. We had to sprint up the entire mountain. So she was dead by the time we got to the cables. I'm like, let's go. I'm pushing her the whole time. She's on the cables in front of me. I don't know if you guys have gone up that, but people like panic and freeze on those things. So my upper body strength is good. So I'm just powering up. I have like fear of heights. So I hate being like stuck on the half of this mountain. She's in front of me and I'm driving her up and I'm just like, let's go, let's go. And her arms are tired. So she's like stopping and I'm pushing her and she's screaming at me. And yeah, we get to the top and that was like our first fight. We had to like go to separate parts of the top and then reconcile.
The Rangers had to come in
but that's, yeah, exactly. But I'm just smashing, just pushing, trying to get at the top of this thing. But
we're cruel enough to each other on the mountain that I think there's a line that I separate between like things that are hard that I do with you type of guys.
Yeah.
And then things I do with my wife. And I don't mix the two.
Yeah.
Smart.
Ooh, have I seen your wife? She's a good boxer,
Yeah,
right?
she is a good boxer, and she's a blue belt in jiu-jitsu, and she was a college athlete, so she's a good athlete. It was just an area that, like, hiking up, she was going really doing well. She was running, I was huffing and puffing because it was just like a long hike straight uphill. But then when it got to the cables, that's more like pulling yourself with your arms, and she was slowing down, and I was like impatient and wanting to get to the top and didn't want to be sitting on the cables, like looking around and thinking about the height. So yeah, I was
Look at the view. And you're like, oh.
yeah. So I was aggressively driving her up and she didn't appreciate it. So
Jordan, she's like, hey, can I come on one of these expeditions? I'm like, I don't think that's a good idea.
Well, the whole purpose of the team guy hike or whatever with your boys is to be as miserable as possible, right?
Yeah.
Like I remember maybe 10 years after I got out of teams, maybe a little less, a couple of my buddies get together. One of them lives in Arizona, and we hadn't seen each other in a while. Everybody's doing their careers, and he's like, we're like, why don't we do a hike in the Grand Canyon? Because and he's an ultra marathoner, right? That's his hobby. And so we're like, well, you live in Arizona, you go there, so you plan the route, right? And so the idea is we're going to take a leisurely little hike down to the river, sit on the river, camp out, drink some beers, like whatever, have a good time for like 2 days, and then hike back out. And you have to park your car a certain distance and take the shuttle. And so we start going down, and we're having to take our packs off and lower them down on ropes and like all this like climbing stuff. And I'm like, let me see that guidebook. And I pull it and I look at it. I said, do you realize this is the toughest, rated the hardest trail in all of the Grand Canyon? He's like, yeah. Why would you do that to us? He's like, why would we do anything less? So it takes us 2 days to get down there. We're at night. We basically get like 5 hours of sleep, have to get a breakdown camp while it's still dark outside, and nonstop walk for 23 miles to get to the top so that we didn't miss the shuttle. Because if we missed the shuttle, it was 8 more miles walking on the road. And I mean, my legs started cramping maybe 3 hours into it, and I just tearing. I'm like, we didn't even stop to drink. We were drinking water while we were walking. Did not stop from like the time the sun came up until we got to that shuttle, and we barely caught that damn shuttle.
So you guys,
and I'm just
duct
like,
tape the guy,
and I'm just like, I'm never going on any trip with you again.
I'm about like a certain level of self-inflicted pain to make it interesting, but like to a point.
Yeah.
And there are guys that just take it too far. Like, hey, we won't bring.
I'm sure
we won't bring sleeping bags. It's going to be like 10 degrees. I'm like, yeah, no, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
That's good luck with that.
Yeah. Or there's my brother and I wanted to do, what was it, Mount Whitney, and so I was probably 14. I think my brother was like 17. So we drive up in his convertible CJ5 Jeep, that like 6-cylinder that had no business going there, and we get up and we figured like we can just get to like wherever, like Mount Whitney portal, and we can pretty much get up there and back in one day. So we drove up, we get there at daybreak, we have like a pack, and we take up running, and we're like humping pretty good, and like we're seeing all these people, these huge packs, and we're like, let's get up there and we'll come back. Yeah, well, we got pretty good. We got up there, like, and then as we started coming down, we got stuck at like the in-between point.
Mm-hmm.
And it was dark, and like we, of course, like the flat, like just there was no way of us getting down. So we pretty much had like a tarp and a sleeping bag. So we're like cuddling in a sleeping bag with it was fucking terrible. Like so ill prepared, didn't pack for it, just figured like, oh fuck it, we can like run up there and run down.
You're gonna be stupid, you gotta be tough.
Yeah.
Yep.
And we got stuck, and then of course and then we wake up, and like it had like dew was ice cracking. We get up, we're like the sun comes up, we sprint down the hill, get into his truck, drive, and we like Lone Pine for like breakfast. And I remember we ate like so much. So it was like pancakes, yeah. We eat all this, and then we went back, of course, driving in his convertible Jeep, which was so stupid. Like, that piece of shit. Yeah, it was a bad adventure.
When it comes to nature, you better be experienced or have done your preparation. Yeah, like when it comes to the mountain, when it comes to the sea, you don't mess around.
There's the internet. Like before then, we had like a guidebook. Like it was like a Boy Scout guidebook. Yes. We're like, oh yeah, we can totally do this. Like now it'd be like, oh, I'm gonna watch a video. Like that stuff didn't exist.
No. So I just had a guy on, Dwayne Fields, Jamaican, then moved to London when he was 6. Second black man to walk the 450 miles to the North Pole. But so he came from a really bad area in London, and he saw Ben Fogle. You guys would recognize him. He's a famous British sort of adventurer. And this guy, Dwayne, had a pistol pointed at him, pulled 3 times, malfunction. So I had a wake up call, and he needed to do something huge. But he said he did about a few hours of Google research, said, I'm gonna walk the North Pole. And that's literally the extent of his experience. He made it happen.
I mean, how many toes did he lose?
He didn't. And so we met him in Antarctica. He and Ben Fogle walk in, and they look like something out of Shackleton's expedition crew. Wow. They're wearing all the gear. They were there for Nat Geo, and I think the BBC, going into Antarctica wearing using all the same equipment that Shackleton did, eating the same food. And we just had him on. He was like, yeah, it was freaking miserable. I'm like, do you think that generation was just harder? He's like, without a doubt.
We had, what's his name? calling a Brady on.
Yes.
And the one thing, as we were talking about, like walking across Antarctica, the only thing I was convinced and wanted to talk about was the food. And I was like, okay, how'd you feel yourself? And he's like, how do you think? And I'm like, it had to be something like coconut oil. And I basically laid it out. And he's like, oh my God. He's like, yeah, I made these things called Colin bars. And we went to a lab and this. And he's like, that's pretty much what it was. And what he did is he basically figured out what the calories were. And that was on the sled. And he knew how much he had to walk. But he also knew the sled was going to get lighter.
Yeah.
And so like, it was pretty amazing. Like, he's like, cause I always thought, I'm like, man, like, I don't know why, like whenever I look at that stuff, I just think like, how am I going to eat?
Yeah.
You know, but yeah, he had like worked with a lab, worked with like a food kitchen to come up with these bars, and he called them Colin bars, but they were like nuts. But I mean, the thing is because it was so cold, they had to be kind of like soft. So when they got cold, like room temperature, they were almost like liquid, but yet in there they were this, so he could eat them. And they had to be something that like didn't go bad. And it was really interesting to like that part of the talk we had him on. That was what I was wanted to talk about. Like, how do you feed yourself?
The most common thing I saw guys take out into the field beyond the MREs, which they would piecemeal, was Gorp. Good old raisin
That's
peanut.
what I always did.
Yeah, because it pretty much has everything you need to sustain
Mix
for
nuts
3,
with
4,
raisins in there and just
14 days. Yeah. But
didn't want to eat it after the first day, but like whatever, it's like it's calories, baby. Just keep going.
That and like some beef jerky. Like, pretty good.
speaking of Mother Nature, throw up the next one. This guy. So this is Richard Barnes. He just solo paddled the Tasman Sea. Did this in February. 67 days. So there's his. I guess it had 2 compartments, one to dry his clothes and then one to sleep. So I'm assuming right there he set a sea anchor. Yep, there you go.
Yeah. Oh.
Go down a little.
So he'd set a sea anchor. Oh,
Look at that. That's his path in blue. That's
Tasmania to New Zealand.
and you know Brian Chantosh.
Yeah.
I'm pronouncing. So he was
Yeah,
a Marine
Chantosh.
that won the Navy Cross, big time CrossFitter.
Yeah,
Guy's a beast.
He's a legendary dude.
They just rode the Atlantic, team of him and 3 others. In the photos afterwards of the before and after, their eyes are sunken. They look like they've
Amazing.
aged.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the name of that race that happened?
The Talisker.
Yeah.
It's a whiskey company.
Yeah.
I think it's roughly anywhere from like 30 days is what it takes
I got consulted by a crew
for that.
to go across that, and they're like, "What should we do with our sleep schedule?" Because there's 4 of us, and there's three people will be growing at all times. But one guy gets to sleep, so like, how should we do this? And I'm, you're screwed. I mean, I get the best advice I could, but
Well,
I didn't even know that existed, but that happens all the time. There's
You're
tons of people that do that.
You're getting pulled into this because of Legacy Expeditions, and John is going to be running the preparation and training for these guys. But we've got 6 special operations guys, all studs, that are going to row Drake's Passage. And Drake's Passage is the most treacherous stretch of sea. They want to do it in less than 12 days because Colin did it in 12 days. But
I thought it was like 12 or
it's not like you're rowing on like just calm waters. It's more like you're up and you're rowing with this side. So, but they're going to go 90 on, 90 off.
Is it a double oar?
It's a double oar.
It's a double oar. Okay. Yeah. So he kind of pitched me their idea, and then I tapped in my friend Tom Newman, who's like a world-class PhD.
Yeah.
And he was the guy that worked with like Yale's rowing and this, and like, he had a whole kind of exchange on it. So it's really interesting. Like my whole deal was like, how do you know that that's the optimal time? You're going to have to like actually get these dudes out. So like, is there force plates in the boat? Is it like HRV? Like, what metrics are you going to assess? Because not everybody's the same.
Yeah.
To give everybody that deal, you might have a guy that can row amazing for 45 minutes and another dude that can row. So my thought was to like, but then there's no way to test it. Like, how are you going to put them in? We're going to put them on a C2 in the gym,
Right.
Like,
So what I did see Brian Chantosh and that entire crew do is what they did in preparation is I think they did 24 hours straight.
Yeah.
Where
on
they
the
did
C2.
like 90, all of them, because they had 4 lined up. They would all sleep, get back on for 90, sleep for 90. That's just for 12 days, dude. That's
there's some really legendary stories about Chantosh through the CrossFit deal.
Yeah.
They had a deal where I think it was a bunch of them. Every year they do a challenge, and there was like a spreadsheet to record mileage, and I think it was on like a C2, and you had to basically record. I think it was like a stackable deal where like the first day was 500, and then it was 1,000, and this, and it basically got to the point where they had to row like 25K in a day, And if you didn't meet the day, they just locked you out of the spreadsheet. And like the final day,
And those
won.
kept on going.
And it like it got to the point where like he legitimately, I think he had to row for like 20 some hours to be able to do this. And the dude literally just like rode for 20 minutes, rode for 30 minutes, took 5, got up and was able. I mean, he's a legendary cat.
Yeah. There's some dudes are missing certain things in the brain where they can't turn it off. And I say that with like admiration.
Yeah. He will, even when he was a Marine, I know that there were like, I have met guys that were in his platoon and like they go on these runs and they were like, what's this dude there? Like basically trying to invade Arizona. Like they would just be like full kid and he'd be like hills in front of them. And they're like, oh my God. Yeah.
He's not a small man.
Yeah. He's a tough dude though.
This next one, we're going to lighten it up. It's interesting. This was first off, this is Sex Essentials, 7 things every guy needs in his nightstand.
Is it a Bible and a gun?
So because the gun was one just from,
I just figured Gideon's Bible is in every hotel. I figured maybe that's like a prerequisite.
Sean, what do you got in your nightstand?
I have nothing in my nightstand. Definitely none of that. I mean, I think you have like a sex therapist. I mean, that's what they're going to come up with because that's their job, right? I mean, if you don't have anything to come up with,
I think I have a journal and a piece of, and like obviously some pencils or a pen in my.
Just where you wake up and write. I've heard that.
Yeah. So I get up and I'll like not that like this journaling thing, but like I try to get up and if I can't sleep, I'll get up and I write. Like if I'm laying there in bed, I try not to fuck around on my phone. I try to get up and write. But that's about the equivalent. I have a gun on the side of my bed, but it's actually in like one of those like metal things that you hit the buttons and they pop out. I don't want
kids.
I got kids.
Yeah.
But also, I've raised my kids around guns where they understand gun safety and they don't know not to touch them and they're not toys. So I don't treat them like some weird, but like, that's all I have in my side table.
I've got a lot of junk.
Yeah.
Even when I was single, I was never as attuned. Go back up.
This stuff?
I have a pistol and I have blue blocking glasses and Bose noise cancellation.
Oh.
That's it. That's all that's on my. That's all that's been on my nightstand for 15 years.
Go back up. Well,
okay. Well, let's go through this.
So one, I've never seen that before. That looks like a bullet.
So a finger vibrator.
Yeah.
Finger vibrator.
So does it go on your finger?
No, you're just using it like a finger, so this could be replaced by.
Why would a dude need that?
No, this is
I think
you're using it on her. So
you're not competent.
This one,
Yeah,
you can get rid of this one by developing some skills in the bedroom.
Yeah.
You notice it says high quality loot. Go down.
Yeah.
Pose from spit.
I guess you go off of Amazon.
You can get rid of this with some proper foreplay.
Yeah.
It's a variety of different condoms.
What's a condom?
This
What's a condom? You guys are Navy SEALs. You know what condoms are.
I love this line. It said,
Rib for her pleasure.
Be wary of her pleasure, fire and ice, because you might end up in a ice pack or hospital scenario. Keep going.
What is it?
I thought you use
What is that?
I guess that's for you.
It's like a silicone sleeve, and I think.
Did I miss all this?
I think you masturbate.
Yes,
You're masturbating.
You're
masturbating way too much if you need a silicone sleeve.
And the next one is interesting. The sex toy cleaner. Like, what are you guys doing?
You've got to clean out that sleeve after you.
Wouldn't you just throw that in the trash?
Yeah. Keep going. And I don't even know what that is. Now it's getting complicated. Yeah. But the wipes, that's a solid.
So that one you stick on you.
Okay,
and it vibrates you and her.
Okay. That's
and
interesting.
Then you can do this with a shower.
Who wrote that? Gigi.
A woman wrote it?
woman?
Okay.
We're gonna have to get her on. She's gonna have to educate. Do you know the love languages?
Yeah,
pretty well.
Yeah, I read the book.
Good book. I've heard it's worth reading.
It is good. Like that way. I mean, it's only good if you read with your partner. Like
because my wife is into it. She's like, well, you know my love language. I'm like, what is it? I'm like,
I feel like it changes.
Gifts.
Yeah,
changes.
What is hers?
Yes, but
acts of service.
That's what my wife says. So I'm like, yeah, it's also affirmation.
Affirmation.
If I don't say enough, then that comes along with it.
It should be hierarchy of love language because everybody needs all of them. It's like which one's the most, and then in what's
the most pressing,
and then in certain situations, certain times they're different.
They also fucked up. I want to rewrite the book because there's one love language that they forgot that is the most.
What are the 5 love languages?
It's words of affirmation,
physical touch,
gift giving,
gift giving,
That's like saying coin operated.
And then it's
Service.
acts of service, and there's one more.
Wait, what's the one? You
So
think they're
the
missing?
6th one is food.
That's
right?
a good one.
Because here's the thing, like if you can cook, and I've told this many times to women, if you are an amazing cook, no dude will ever leave you. If you come home, dudes will race
Isn't
home.
that an act of service though?
That's not necessarily that. Well, I'm going to go even more, because like if I come home and my wife's like, "Oh, I bought food and this," or if there's something amazing and I walk in the door, like I've constantly asked like guys like with wives and this, I'm like, "Does your wife cook?" They're always like this. Every dude that I know whose wife's an amazing cook, like what's his name? Chris Duffin's wife is an amazing cook. He sends me pictures of what he's like, "Look what my wife made tonight," and I like tear up a little. I'm like, "Oh my God, that looks so amazing. That's a wonderful woman. I hope you hug her constantly." But like, that's true. Like if like I don't know, maybe I'm not necessarily a foodie, but like if there's food there and a woman can cook and make stuff, because I cook as well.
Yeah.
I was going to say that's a two-way street.
I love to cook.
If you can cook for her.
Yeah. And like I cook all the time because I'm just know how I like it. So I'm happy to cook, and it's one of those things I love to do. But like a woman that can cook and make stuff and shop, like food is so important.
So we're just like carnivores, so it doesn't really matter. It's like, all we're doing is cooking meat and eggs and crap. So it's like,
but like, see,
nobody has to be good.
Do you guys drink wine? Do you drink wine?
Every night.
Every night.
Yeah, I love wine too.
I don't.
It just pairs so well.
Both health and just
No, as I was telling him, we got into this wine, like this wine club for that Cinque Non, and also for a couple others. So they send us these allocations, and we have all this like dope wine that I'm afraid it's going to go bad. So I'm like, it's really
yeah. It just pairs good with dinner too. It just makes the food experience much better.
That's where I lack it, because my wife is into wine, but I've got zero.
Yeah, it does enhance. It enhances dinner, and it's nice to just relax at the end of the day.
I think the guy played for Green Bay. I'm trying to remember, but he became a sommelier.
Oh, did
Will Blackman?
Oh, did he?
Yeah. So former NFL.
I love sommeliers, and especially if you go to a nice restaurant, like they always do. Want me to send them over? I'm like, yes. And I'd love to have the dude come over. I'm like, tell me what you have. Tell me what's amazing. Like, what's something I can only get here? And then he always asks you like, what are your favorite wines? And then I'll be like, I love an Abacus. I like Cinque Non. I give him like 3, and the dude will be like, as a matter of fact, I think I have something perfect for you. So if you understand,
it all seems so damn pretentious to me, man.
It is. It is, but like if,
it has alcohol in it, right? Yep, that's why I'm drinking it. I'm not drinking it for the taste.
I do.
What about Fit Vine? Because didn't Fit Vine? I know it's like the wine for athletes where they removed a lot of the sugar content. Have you not heard of that?
I had that organic wine that Rob Wolf sent me, like a
Dry Farms.
I really liked it.
Yeah.
I thought it was great. I mean, it was like a Tuesday night wine. So I kind of things like Tuesday night, Friday, Saturday night wines. It was like a a lot of Tuesday night wines.
The interesting thing with wine too is like the wine makers are like ag guys, and they're so it's very different than the pretentious side. So then you have like the restaurant tours, and some of the wine critics are snobby, but the actual guys that make the wine and grow are awesome to talk to, and they're like rednecks. Yeah. So it's like if you go to that source, you get a completely different.
They're into the art.
Yeah, which was like Central California was so many good wineries and guys that like did jiu-jitsu with us, and they're like managed Bienvenido vineyards.
It's so nice to tour their facilities too.
Awesome.
Like their attention to detail and how they manage it. I just love the attention.
Massive difference between Central California in the wineries and Napa.
Totally. And it's like probably how Napa was a long time ago when they were getting started.
Have you done the Napa wine train?
I have.
Yeah, we got absolutely to the point where they're like, hey, you guys are.
And even Sonoma, Sonoma's way a lot more mellow than Napa. Napa just definitely has that. All the restaurants,
because they got the Michelin star restaurant.
And it ramps up, but you go to wine, I kind of like at the roots.
I think a wine tour for me is Fredericksburg, man. I mean, like that's as advanced as I need to get.
Whiskey than wine.
It's great.
Go to Fat Ass Vineyard, man,
Dude,
and I
love the wine
they got
tours.
a country band out there, and like
it's good.
It's
actually.
good.
Only if
like
their wine was
legit.
good. That's the only thing.
But the thing I love about Fredericksburg is it's like winery, whiskey.
Yeah.
Distillery,
Yeah.
winery,
Yeah.
whiskey distillery.
You can't be upset at that.
Yeah.
No, you
Yeah.
can't. It's Texas. I mean,
Yeah.
to California. You're a California native, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was born in Torrance.
That's
and
right.
then grew up
That's
in
right.
Southern California, then went to Berkeley.
All right, let's. We're going to go outside of men's journal, but this one has been causing a lot of uproar. The MH370 Malaysian air flight that went missing in March of 2014. Did you guys watch this documentary?
I have not. Is it on Netflix?
You've got to watch it on Netflix.
Oh, wow.
So, do you remember this happening?
I do. I remember it. Yeah.
I remember it now that you say it, but
'Cause,
I don't remember like seeing anything on a documentary.
Didn't Don Lemon say this might have gone into a black hole?
I'm going to say this, even on the documentary, because it is sad. You got a lot of the family members who have no closure because they've still not found the Malaysian air flight. But the sort of summary here is they took off. It was a red eye from Malaysia, heading to Beijing, got to the spot where they transitioned from air traffic control of Malaysia to Vietnam air traffic control. And there's a little buffer. So the pilot signs off, says goodnight. And then all of a sudden, they had problems tracking. He takes a hard left turn, heads back across Malaysia, and eventually this is where they had bring in Inmarsat and basically in Marsat in the GPS signal, that he could either take a north route or a southern route, and they concluded that based off the pings, he took a southern route and ended up in the Indian Ocean in a general region. But they searched for over 2 years in the ocean. Some debris was found on the coast of Africa, as well as Reunion Island, which is a French territory. You probably remember there was a section of the wing, very small section, that was found. But they had theories from it was the pilot, but from a lot of the evidence, the pilot was of sound mind. They're like, a lot of the people that were close. Even there was one of the flight attendants. His wife was also a flight attendant. She lived, but the husband died. That wife knew the pilot, and she's like, he didn't kill my husband. He didn't kill and then that they were hijacked. And then there was also weird things that, the U.S. shot it out of the sky because there was gear on it that was heading towards China. It's worth watching. 3 episodes.
Well, we're real good about spin doctoring stuff. Like, do you remember? I was always a little like, what was it, 9/11? You remember the whole story where the guys on the phone like, let's roll, and then they like took it down.
Todd
I'm
Beamer.
like-
God bless.
I'm
Todd
like,
Beamer.
yeah, like like that was one that was going towards the White House, and I'm like, okay, that guy downed it, or we just vaporized it. Like I kind of tend to go with like, did the country shoot it down, or did somebody shoot it down?
And remind me, the guys had basically box cutters, right? That's what they were armed with.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like there's like you remember? I don't know. I just think that like sometimes we do really good on creating these like narratives, like
But that
like,
went- that
like
went-
in the
that went-
Ukraine. Like,
that
do you
went
remember it was
down-
like the
that went-
island where they were fighting? I remember early on there was that Ukraine
Yeah,
story
yeah.
turned out to be totally fake.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So we got to like
13
yeah,
sailors.
yeah, the 13 guys that were like slugging it out with them, and then we found that never happened.
And they said they were dead, and then they're actually taken hostage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think timing wise, that one it went down in a field in Pennsylvania, and like a big open pasture. And I think timing wise, that one would have hit the White House before the one that hit the Pentagon.
Yeah.
So I find it highly unlikely that they didn't shoot down something going to the Pentagon, but they shot down that one. I mean, I think that seems legit to me. That basically these dudes are like, hey, we're gonna die, but let's die our way, right? Like let's save some lives. I think it's
I
think it's
know.
reasonable.
I don't, based upon like now it's a little different. Every movie, like anytime the hijacker, the people were all docile. And there was even a dude recently.
You saw that they took it.
yeah.
Which is I watched it where
I think it was a Southwest flight.
Yeah.
And the several passengers took him down and got him in a chokehold.
yeah.
no,
They didn't do anything.
They didn't do anything and the
until
guy-
he hit one of the flight
Yeah,
attendants.
hit, but they still didn't do anything. Like people were just like looking away, and I'm like, I would have like,
See that, but
I would've
that's what I'm thinking. Like, so
I'd have been like, Sean, hold him. I'm going to try. Stop resisting.
So-
Stop resisting.
Quit hitting your
This is a good
face.
And then
question.
his neck got broken. I don't know
Do
how
you
that
think they
happened.
should have some sort of self-defense in public school where they teach?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in Japan, like judo's mandatory. So
Oh, no, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
everyone trains, and men and women. So judo. I mean, it's a great base if you don't know any. I mean, that's great. It's
Submissions.
submissions, it's takedowns, and it's takedown defense. So I mean,
Well, the best thing that I've seen happen recently to jiu-jitsu is the fact that Tom Brady's wife Giselle got basically trimmed out by a black belt in jiu-jitsu. So now every TB12 that Tom Brady has is probably going to have their own jiu-jitsu program. Right. So it's best thing ever happened to jiu-jitsu. I don't know if you saw that, but it was on the slow your roll thing. I don't know if you watch it, but the guy called in and he's like, when a black belt in jiu-jitsu takes Tom Brady's wife, he's like, dude, he's the GOAT. He gets no respect. I'm like, dude, it's the best thing to happen to jiu-jitsu. Now it's gonna be world famous. Everybody's gonna have a jiu-jitsu program.
Go to the next one. This one was another documentary. This actually was a TV show, but The Skinny Shot. And so this is about Ozempic, which Ozempic is just a doc. It's a
how
brand.
does it work? Like semaglutide. How does it work?
Yeah, so semaglutide is the generic name for it. Ozempic was when it was approved to be a diabetic drug, and then
type 2 diabetic drug.
Yeah, type 2 diabetic drug. And then they had an oral version that came out a few years later, and then they approved semaglutide for weight loss, maybe just like 3 or 4 years ago. But what it is, so it's what's called a GLP-1 agonist. So it's a glucagon-like peptide. It basically decreases glucagon because glucagon increases blood glucose and it increases insulin secretion. So that's just on the pancreas. So it lowers your overall blood glucose, but it also has effects in your brain, decreases your appetite, has effects in cardiac muscle. So there's research now that if you that you have GLP-1 receptors in your heart, and it'll decrease the total pressure that hits your left ventricle. So it can get rid of left ventricle hypertrophy, which is something that's a big problem for power athletes and endurance runners and things like, endurance athletes and things like that.
Athletes are.
It decreases, it's been shown to decrease neuroinflammation. It's decreasing beta amyloid plaques. Alzheimer's disease is generally considered, I'd say by most neurologists, it's really considered type 3 diabetes. It's a blood glucose regulation thing that's injuring vessels in the brain, and it's causing neuroinflammation, and that's leading to these plaque formations that we see. And so and then the other thing does, and the other thing that does is it decreases gastric motility. So it decreases how fast your stomach digests and how fast your small intestine digests. So you feel full. You feel your appetite regulation of what you crave is lower, but you also feel full. And if you try to eat too much, it's kind of like a gastric bypass. Like it's almost, your stomach's not smaller, but it's just not moving, and so you get nauseous really easy.
So is this, with that said, is this a better option than the gastro bypass?
Absolutely. So the question is, how long would you have to take it to meet those kind of needs? Like, you have to be really, really, really obese to meet the criterion for gastric bypass. But if you take this long enough, and there are studies up to, I've seen a study that was 72 weeks long, 68 weeks long. There's a 72-week-long study that did a 3-year follow-up, and it compared this one to a very similar one called tirzepatide, I think. It's not as popular in the market, but works a little better. It's a GIP and GLP-1 agonist. Not really important, but they both kind of do the same thing. These have an effect on mitochondrial density and function within your muscle cells, and leptin sensitivity and fatty acid oxidation. So you're more likely to use fat as a fuel source while you're on this. It's going to decrease your appetite. It's cardiovascularly protective, neurologically protective. The biggest side effect of it is nausea. You can get nausea to the extent of vomiting. And if you're nauseous and vomiting, obviously you're probably going to get other things like headaches and all sorts of stuff like that. That's primarily due to the decrease to the slowdown of your gut motility from your stomach all the way down to your large intestine. You can overcome that with an over-the-counter medication, or not a prescribed medication, very benign medication that increases gastric motility. So if you take that and it's too much, then you take this pill and it increases your gastric motility, and you don't have all that sensation.
Did they originally develop it for basically like
It was-
an
it was-
appetite suppressant.
It was originally studied. It was originally studied for diabetes, for type 2 diabetes.
So what it's like, but like appetite suppressant, because we know if you
No.
lose 20 pounds, type 2 diabetes just goes away.
Well, yeah. So handy coincidence, which is why it got shifted that way. Their idea was, hey, if we can activate these glucagon receptors,
Sure.
then we're going to decrease glucagon,
Sure.
and if we do that, we're going to decrease blood glucose. So we're going to maintain and protect the beta islet cells in the pancreas that produce insulin. Because the worst thing about type 2 diabetes is that it gets progressively worse over your life.
Mhm.
You become less sensitive. You lose the ability to produce as much insulin over time. And very often, type 2 diabetes, if they
Becomes
live
type
long enough, they have to start taking insulin.
Well,
Yes.
but like I always thought type 2 was you lose insulin sensitivity.
Yeah,
So, but the beta cells still work, but they just can't keep up with the amount
Right.
that needs to push out.
And-
Is there ever a point where like the beta cells just burn out?
yeah, and that's essentially what's happening.
With type 1.
And anytime you have chronically elevated blood glucose, I mean that's a big so insulin sensitivity is probably the primary thing if you're going to be healthy. You want to give me one lab and say like, how healthy is this guy? That's the lab I would
And
choose.
the more muscle in relation to fat.
So
the
you'll
greater metabolic flexibility.
maintain more muscle mass. You'll have less body fat, but you also have far less inflammation.
Yeah.
And the inflammation damages stuff. The chronically elevated blood glucose leads to there's an enzyme in your body, in your red blood cells and in your nerve tissues that turn that glucose into like little shards. You think about like fiberglass. When you work with fiberglass, you get these little. So it's like rock candy, right? These little sugar crystals that damage the blood vessels as the red blood cells go through capillaries. They go through single file, and it scrapes the lining, and they get inflamed, and they cut off, and you have a big pool of blood, and and the nerves have that enzyme as well, and so now you damage the alpha fibers, the really small fibers that let you feel pain. So now you can't feel it, and you have this pool of blood, and you have all this sugar in there, and you get this diabetic foot ulcer, and now you're getting your toes cut off and all that stuff. So the idea behind this one was really we're going to affect the pancreas and affect blood glucose, which it does. But they noticed, hey, it has this really amazing effect on weight loss. And so
Is it weight loss or is it like fat loss?
well, so that's one of the critiques. Anything that's good starts getting bad press. There was something about I heard Peter Attia talking about this on an Ask Me Anything, and Peter Attia is brilliant. I'm not taking anything away from him, but if you look at the fact, well, this is affecting my heart's efficiency because it has GLP-1 receptors, and now my left ventricle is more efficient. I'm not putting as much blood in my heart before it contracts, and so my heart rate's going to be slightly faster, but that's probably physiologically better,
Sure.
right? And then there's all this about you're losing muscle and fat. Well, yes, because most people who do this are drastically obese. Most of them are diabetic, and they don't work out at all. So if you work out for glucose receptors on your muscles, you can maintain muscle mass, and then you would just lose fat. So this is like anything else in my mind. Obesity and lack of fitness and most metabolic, almost all Neolithic disease, the stuff that we think about that drag society down, those are all lifestyle problems, right? And everybody wants a pharmaceutical intervention for a lifestyle problem. That doesn't exist. You got to change the lifestyle, but it's really hard to change the
Shortcuts
lifestyle.
and hacks.
It's really hard to change the lifestyle when you're hungry all the time, you're craving food all the time, you feel like crap all the time. But you take this,
And it goes away.
people don't feel hungry. Their brain's not telling them they're hungry. They feel full. And now you can get them to change their lifestyle a lot easier. And then you can have some really long-term effects. Now this tirzepatide, the biggest difference between this.
I have a hard problem with that because every time I've ever dieted, been under 10% body fat, I'm generally hungry all the time, and that's like the receipt for it. And I know if like I'm not hungry, then I probably ate too much.
I've heard the opposite, that when people got to like 8%, that they felt full from what they were eating. They actually couldn't eat as much protein as they required. You heard of semaglutide? I remember when we were all texting, and you heard of it as
I
a
haven't
weight
tried
loss?
it yet. Yeah, I have. I've been seeing it everywhere too. It's in every clinic now. Every IV place has it now. It's like
You're kidding me.
everywhere. Yeah,
The IV clinics, I thought it had to be prescribed.
I see it. Semaglutide. I see it. I see it at testosterone clinics. I see it all over the place now.
It's
Semaglutide,
everywhere because it's the new miracle drug. Now the
Well, the
tirzepatide-
Kardashians are taking it.
Well, so and
that's
this
what's
is where on Reddit,
Oh.
and that Reddit folks,
That ain't
Reddit
no
is
smoke.
never a good
Yeah.
source for accurate information. So the drama is one. I think there's if you want to put it on the center screen, the pens. I think there's a shortage on the pens right now.
Yeah,
Right,
that's
so-
what
And so
my,
those with
yeah,
diabetes are upset because they're seeing
yeah, human lung.
who's the famous comedian, Chelsea.
Handler?
I think she admitted to taking it, but you have a lot of these celebrities that are coming out and saying, "Yeah, I've lost weight and I'm on Ozempic or I'm on semaglutide," and you even have people that are obese on Reddit upset at those who are like, if you were to go on it, people would be like, "Oh, he doesn't need it. He's fit. We need that." And so I think this shortage, and there's a misunderstanding of where the shortage
Do they
is.
only do it in pens?
Right. So the Ozempic, you can't control the dosage of. You click it and you get a fixed dose.
Yeah.
That one was approved in like 2012 for diabetes. Okay. And then the oral one came out like 2 years later. Now semaglutide, again, the generic name, you have that made in a compounding pharmacy and they put something like B12 in it. B12 helps with nausea. So that would make you feel a little better. They can put a little BPC 157 in control. So now it's a unique compound. Compounding pharmacies can easily meet the need, and they have been. And in fact, whatever governing body writes this gave the compounding pharmacies permission to make semaglutide, even though it was patented, because of the shortage.
Mhm.
And so the Ozempic itself is really being held for type 2 diabetes, and you have to have type 2 diabetes to get that, for insurance to pay for it. And that's like $1,800 a month. Semaglutide is about $120 a month if you get it through a compounding
How much?
pharmacy.
How much for 120?
So the other thing is you're supposed to slowly increase your dose over time. And so depending on how quickly you go up, a $120, $150 vial would last you anywhere, I'd say, from 4 weeks to 8 weeks, depending on where you're at in your dosage and how you're going. So you basically go up until you get nauseous,
Is it daily?
and then you stay there. It's once a week,
Okay.
so it's a weekly
But
shot.
I've heard people taking it like every 2 or 3 days.
Yeah,
they take it.
you can do it. There's no real benefit to doing it more frequently if you're at the right dosage. But if you're just so afraid of being nauseous that you're going to just take a little bit and a little bit and a little bit, a little bit, that's one way to do it. But the other way is you just take it until you feel nauseous, and then
Bring it down.
and then stay there until you don't feel nauseous anymore, and then you can try to go up a little bit. But you're only going up like 0.05.
I don't like your approach.
Yeah.
I'll ratchet
It's
it
like-
back and not feel nauseous at all.
Yeah,
Well,
but
insulin for diabetics is expensive.
it
I
also
know because my son's type 1, so we do Humalog pens, which is just short, and then the long acting, which is it's not Lantus, it's a different one, but the long acting, and they come in pens. The cheapest one is the R, the medium.
yeah.
So we use a combination. The R is great for like real high protein meals, and then you use the long acting for obviously like fasting and what. So there's like an interesting deal, but like a lot of insurance doesn't cover it, so I just buy the stuff I want.
right.
And I'm like, fuck, dude, like insulin's expensive. Like if it's just, it should be dramatically cheaper. In every other country, it's cheaper. I don't know why it's so expensive.
Now, the other thing that's interesting about semaglutide, almost all the studies were done on obese people, diabetic. I mean, all the studies I've seen, you're looking at a BMI somewhere around 37, 38, 40. Like these are big people. The tirzepatide works a little better. You'll lose more weight and it lasts longer. So they've done studies like a 3-year follow-up. So you lose all your weight and you don't take it for 3 years. And at the end of 3 years, I want to say 35-40% of the people on the tirzepatide had maintained 100% of their weight loss. Now, what I found, because I have a lot of clients on this, I've probably prescribed this to 100 people. People who are relatively fit, like guys like us, if we take this, we don't need nearly as much. So I have guys who've just started the initiation dose, stayed on the initiation dose for 3 or 4 months, still lost 15 pounds because of the other mechanisms of actions of how it's causing you to burn fat, because it's changing the signaling from your fat to your brain. So you're more likely to burn fat. And if you're somebody who exercises, you have a lot of GLUT4 receptors, so you're pulling up your blood glucose, and that's anabolic. Like if you pull glucose into your muscles are doing anabolic stuff and they're growing. So I've seen, I mean, I have like guys who are, UFC fighters and stuff. They're in great shape, and they take like the smallest amount of this, never change that, and still they'll lean out like 10 pounds, 10, 15 pounds, and just feel great, never have any of the nausea.
Are we getting paid for this? This basically became like a commercial for.
Well, it just so happens that you have an expert.
Yeah,
If
you go to my website
right
now.
Well, guys, it is St. Patty's Day, and we've got I've got mimosas to drink. So let's get to the Q&A. Will, what do you got, man?
So no questions coming in yet, but I got some free ones. This one's for possibly Doc and John. Having shoulder pain in the front and back of my shoulder, painful, but not necessarily restricting my strength. I consulted the doctor, and they said probably a tear, which would require surgery, but they can't determine until they take an MRI. Problem is, I'm competing in jiu-jitsu, don't want to stop. I've heard there are ways of rehabbing shoulder tears where guys never have surgery. Is there any truth to that?
So if you guys didn't hear that, the question was having shoulder pain in the front and the back. Doctors are saying without MRIs, it's probably a tear and you require surgery. This guy's competing in jiu-jitsu, doesn't want to stop. Asked, is there a way to rehab the shoulder? They've heard of this, athletes, that doesn't require surgery.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's a preferred way of going about it. So there's a possibility he has tears. There's a likely he has tears. It's impossible that he has full thickness tears, or he would notice that he can't move his shoulder in certain ways. So with partial tears, you can regenerate those. There are peptides that will help you do that. You can inject directly into the joint. You can inject kind of just around the joint. Things like TB4, TB500 will help you regrow connective tissue like tendons and ligaments. Pentasan will help you regrow cartilage if that's one of your problems. You can also put AOD and hyaluronic acid in there, which decreases inflammation, increases the healing rate and all that. Shoulders are pretty easy. John and I injected each other's shoulders for a full series of hyaluronic acid and AOD. And, it's a pretty simple thing to do, then of course you have stem cells and exosomes and those types of things.
Too expensive.
I don't think those work I think those don't even work as well as peptides, but they definitely don't work any better. And peptides are very readily available.
Well, you could even take it a step back even further and just go with prolotherapy. So
I was going to say this is all regenerative medicine. It's like
like for the prolotherapy where they take B vitamins and they inject it and it causes inflammation. I had a tear.
Or they can just put saline in there and it causes an inflammation.
So
or they can put your own plasma back in. So PRP. There's all sorts of regenerative stuff.
I had a tear in one of my tendons, and I went and got Prolo. The guy basically injected. It was Pentasan with B vitamins, and then he injected ozone into my knee, and in 6 weeks. Tear completely fixed.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and that's like just B vitamins, inflammation, and ozone. I mean, like you can Google prolotherapy and naturopaths do it. And it's like, I mean, and then when
or go to regenerative medicine in your area, there'll be somebody who's hip on all this and injecting all this.
You can do what Doc's talking about with all this voodoo with peptides, and they can throw all that in there. And then like the Pentasan. So the guy did B vitamins and Pentasan and ozone. And the ozone was incredible. Like that was like almost like an actuator in such a way. So,
I did the Pentasan while you were giving me the shots on 777, both in the right knee, which is, I don't think I have a problem with my knee. I think it's the right hip is causing that. And the shoulder feels freaking. So, I mean, jiu-jitsu is your.
So I would
sport.
say that's all fine and good. But if he's using his arms too much when he's grappling, which is like 90% of people's problems, then he's going to continue to have shoulder problems regardless of how his shoulder does.
So break that down.
So you need to use your lower body in jiu-jitsu. So people tend to bring their arms over their head and they get disconnected and they overuse their upper body. So their arms are always getting disconnected and attacked. So if he's doing that constantly, he's going to have shoulder problems forever.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
also how you
Done.
get into weird arm
It's
submissions.
weird. You
too.
got to use your legs like 80% of the time. So what happens is someone pressures forward instead of pushing back, you need to elevate them over your head with your lower body.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a constant like using your lower body to fight, especially on your back. So people are on top of you and people are going like this and they're reaching, they're trying to like manipulate and their arms are just getting cranked and like it's hard. Like I had shoulder injuries for a long time and like until I like got better and figured it out, it just was
By like process of elimination.
yeah, like you get better and you eventually you're like, okay, I had to like put my arm into my belt and just use one arm for like 4 months. And it made me use my legs the entire time because I couldn't like fight people off without using my legs. And then at the end, when the shoulder felt better, I had this like great guard because my legs were like very dynamic and I knew how to roll upside down. And
So
stuff.
you try to break that in people when they come in, because I would assume my upper body is
Super difficult. Yeah. I mean, because people's instinct is all, I mean, it's going to be like arms, because we do everything with our arms. And now in jiu-jitsu, it's like you got to be able to use your feet. It's weird. You're like on your back like a cockroach and you have to use your lower body and it's different, you know.
dude.
But
I
I mean,
laugh.
don't you cure people like that? Like I know that like I'm always like kind of trying to pin my elbows to my rib cage because the minute that something goes this way is where I either end up in like
Yeah.
Kimura,
Yeah.
this Americana, or I end up in some like weird arm triangle. So I'm like constantly like frames.
Yeah, it's mainly like being able to use your knees and bring your knees to your chest like
frames.
frames. If you could bring your knees up, you could bump people.
Yeah.
And you just have, if they're pressuring forward and you give them a little bump, then they go too far forward and then they have to sit back, right?
It's like
I laugh at. Have you
Sean
seen all these
Steiner.
memes?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah,
they're
yeah,
totally
exactly.
everywhere, but where it shows like a guy talking shit to another guy, and it's just like, hey, it's a boxer in jiu-jitsu, and they're like, fine, let's go. And the guy gets on his back,
Yeah,
just like,
I know,
come on,
I
go.
know.
Yeah.
Well,
That's the epic death of jiu-jitsu.
we
It's
have
like,
a
take
deal
downs.
where like if I ever see you pull guard, I'm gonna punch you in your face.
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that's
yeah.
like it's kind of a
You know their weakness.
no, it's just like I don't know. It's like a joke where it's like if I ever see you like pull guard or go into a turtle voluntarily, like other than like within the confines of like we're teaching these moves, I'm just gonna like bite you on the face or like
And
punch you in the
break
face or
and
do
punch.
something weird.
All right, another question.
We actually just had one come in on the same topic. What are y'all's thoughts on stem cell treatments when it comes to joint and shoulders?
Well, so let me take this. I recently went through it with CPI. It was good. One of like Ed Clay and Scott Nelson. I think it was because I'm going through what you're going through with or giving me with the peptides for the joints. I think it was a cumulative effect. Now I've heard people rave about it, where stem cells or exosomes have come in and saved them. Others were like, it was okay.
I'll just couch with this. I have this is completely by happenstance. One of the guys that used to train at my gym when I built the gym in his house is sits on the board. It's like one of the foremost experts on all this stuff, and he's like has a huge clinic down in Palm Springs where they do golfers and this. So he's pretty much he's actually doing I think his second PhD on basically juvenile diabetes because of cash. So he called me yesterday, and the problem they're running into, we talked about like the people in Tijuana and also the people down in Colombia, what they're effectively doing. And I think the problem that people are running into is they're culturing the stem cells outside the body. The problem is it ends up being copies of copies of copies. And it's like, did you see the movie?
Less effective with each copy.
Multiplicity. Remember where like the dude's copy was pretty good, but then the copies were making copies. He's like, it's the same problem they're running into, and how they're doing it. And they're obviously washing the stem cells, so there are no exosomes, and they're not boosting with exosomes.
Right.
So they basically brought enough UFC fighters in and enough famous people to their deal that they're great at marketing, but their results are not good. So,
But John, that's like, you don't have to be the best. You have to be the best known. That's
But
life.
here's the thing, like the stem cell stuff, and everybody I've talked to, and I know this because we've done stem cells for years. It's underwhelming. And like
especially for the price.
So what they did is they had to wash the stem cells, and they washed away all the RNA, which was all the exosomes, and then they realized that like it'd be like having a whole bunch of like soldiers with no direction, no instructions, and nothing, and then just standing around then hoping they go do the right thing. So
Well, they've also proven that about 98% of all the stem cells you inject in a joint will be dead within 24 hours.
Okay.
And so for people who don't know what exosomes are, is they're basically little packets of information that get secreted from stem cells. So that's what's actually doing the benefit of the stem cells. So somebody figured out, well, if we culture all these stem cells and then we stress them, when we stress them, they'll release all these exosomes, and then we'll collect those exosomes and we'll inject them. Only problem is there's a billion different ways to stress a stem cell. So it needs to be stressed in the same way that you need to repair. That part they haven't figured out yet. I've seen this. I've been part of it. I was part of a trial they did with a bunch of seals. Had about $20,000 worth of stem cells put in both shoulders, both knees, and then an IV of it. And the only thing that happened to me is my left shoulder hurt for about 6 months. And nothing was better.
So, dude,
so that one right
I had
there.
fetal stem cells that were. I was in a research study with fetal stem cells. They brought this thing in like a fucking steel case. The guy unlocked it because it was so valuable. They injected it in my shoulders, my knees. I noticed absolutely nothing. And I have, I've done a series of things because I've been involved in this for a while. And the comment I always use was underwhelmed. The only thing that I've seen that legitimately was life changing was when they dosed me with about 6 billion or 6 trillion exosomes. And it was, they injected it when they put it in the IV. Less than 24 hours later, whatever inflammation or whatever was going on in my brain, because it's so small, they move across the blood-brain barrier, cleared the inflammation. And I had like a warm buzzing feeling like I had just had a drink, but I hadn't had a drink. And I was like, pretty good. Like I got a buzz. It lasted for 6 months. And
I remember you quit drinking coffee during that because you're just like, I
stopped
feel like
drinking
I need
coffee.
it.
So the part of my brain that was damaged, they actually prescribed me Adderall because it stimulated it.
Mm-hmm.
I realized that I hadn't taken Adderall in over a year. One day when I looked at the bottle and I was like, oh, I used to take this stuff. I stopped drinking coffee. I like woke up and I was like, normally I get up and like fire up the coffee. And I was like, I just forgot to drink coffee. My wife's like, have you not been drinking coffee? I'm like, no, like it was like the most life-changing thing was that exosome. And then when I went and I did the hyperbarics, I had a similar effect at about 20, where all of a sudden, like I kind of had this weird buzz and I was like, oh, this is something.
Hyperbarics just made me feel younger, man. Like I just felt better.
If I was a current NFL player, I would have one in my house.
Yeah.
And I would have kidnapped Dr. Joe Dirt and I'd have him chained in another room and just be like, Joe, set this thing up, whatever.
Because I mean, recovery as well is just, it's
like
accelerated.
It's like I popped out of that thing because I would go first thing in the morning. So I'd get there, I'd drive down there, like leave my house at 6:15, 6:30, get there at 7. And then it was like 15 minutes down, an hour and 15. And I'd pop out of there like 8:15, whatever it was. And I was
you remember how you feel after Dreger dies?
Oh yeah.
Right. That's the same
Pissed
thing.
off.
Oh,
joking.
So you go to, we were supposed to stay around 20, but we were bouncing between 20 and 30.
Drager dies, for the listeners, are
rebreather, 100%
rebreathers,
O2.
100% O2.
So that's what we're trying to do, right? We're doing 2 ATA roughly. That's about 33 feet. But our dives were 2 hours, right?
Yeah.
So that you do this for an hour, you get 100% O2. It gets dissolved down into your plasma. You get air, you get oxygen in your plasma that's not attached to your red blood cells. And you feel euphoric and strong.
Your body doesn't need hemoglobin to move oxygen around. It basically absorbs into the plasma and it oxygenates parts of your body that never got oxygen. So all of a sudden, like it's jamming stuff in there.
And it increases brain-derived neurotropic factor, VEGF, like new vascularization in the brain. All that.
Here's one last thing I'll say about
it. Was amazing, dude.
Stem cell it was Brian who asked that question, I believe. So the other thing about STEM is they said, hey, you couldn't work out for 2 months, where Penisane, you're like, yeah, go work out, or PRP, go work out.
I completely disagree with that approach and what they're trying to do. So stem cells only activate in response to stress. And so there was, I'm going to totally butcher the name of it. It was called not Regenix, but it was the group in Germany. So basically what they did is they developed this version of PRP where they took blood and then there was these little tiny pearls that were like interleukin 1, 2, or 3 blockers. They take the PRP, they'd spin it down, and they inject it back. So the story goes like Brian Urlacher and Peyton Manning went. Peyton pretty much went over, and I only know this because the doctor that went with him, I sat next to at a dinner, and they pretty much said, I think it was $50K a treatment. Just keep doing it until he's better. It's like $2 million later, his neck is fine.
Oh, it was.
Yeah. They just kept doing it until his neck healed. But what they did, and then what they had to do though, is he had to exercise. I think they were doing like hot and cold, exercise, the whole deal, put him in like a completely like lit up state. And then that's when they took the blood because it was the most advantageous.
$2 million?
What's that?
$2 million.
I think it was $50K a treatment. I think they just kept doing it until his neck was fine.
I'm checking my. Yeah, no, that's not gonna.
Yeah,
It's a bank account.
but here's the deal. He came back and played for Denver.
I had
won
that
a
much,
Super
but
Bowl,
it was in
and
SVB.
well, he obviously went and won a Super Bowl, and they gave him 100 Papa John's, so it was
Oh,
pennies on the dollar, right?
Yeah.
But and then Urlacher went, but I know because I saw long story short, I sat next to the doc that was with him, and the whole thing requires stem cells require activation, like the one thing, and I got this from David Sinclair's book, which was I was always fascinated, like why is it that like we see these levels of exposure, whether it be like over 170 with heat shock proteins or cold, what is it about the contrast? He had a little blurb in his book that talked about when you put yourself close to the edge, like whether it be a workout where all of a sudden you like take that hit where you're like, holy shit, I'm going to die. If anybody's ever done CrossFit, you remember the first day of CrossFit, that feeling of like, oh shit, I got to get out of here. Like that moment, whether it be from like hot or cold, where all of a sudden you think like, holy shit, I got to get out of here. I'm going to die. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
Like,
of course. Yeah.
like, yeah. I mean, I know, I know all you guys know, but like I was in a sauna and it was like 220, 240. And all of a sudden you like take a breath and you're like, you get a little nervous, like, holy shit, what if I get locked in here? I'm going to die. And that moment, your body has a positive gene expression where your genes are like, we're in this together. I'm going to help you. Whereas if you don't do that, your genes basically are like, fuck you. I'm going to kill you off early.
You know where I felt that the most is when we used to do combatives and you get like center stage and you've got to go through like 10 dudes for 30 seconds each.
Yeah.
That's always where I felt that the worst.
Or like Ray's, you're getting choked and you're thinking to yourself, could I hold on just a second longer and work your way out of this? And then all of a sudden you feel it and you're like, no, I'm good.
Well, I mean, your body is purely adaptive. So if you push yourself past your limits, your body figures out ways to be able to adapt to that. You do that, we'll say a different extreme. So you do it in hot and you do it in cold, but you do the same thing with physiologic stress, emotional stress, whatever. Anytime you go past your limits, you develop a capacity to be better at it. And what is death? Death comes from lack of resources and ability to adapt to your environment. So if you're constantly pushing yourself, you're going to be more resilient. You're going to be able to.
You mean I can't just take semaglutide and become more resilient?
Fine. All right, let's go. 2 more questions, and then we'll close this out.
So this one's for Sean. What's the deal with Conor McGregor in the UFC? I actually saw him on TV yesterday donating $1 million or something.
I also saw him greeting Putin, but that was like 4 years ago.
Yeah.
So I mean, is he going to fight again? Is he more personality now? Is he being singled out?
I think he's going to definitely fight again. I don't think he wants to go out with his last fight being his last fight. His performances weren't that great. And for his brand, he's a marketer now and he's a promoter. So I think he needs to have the finish that he wants. So I feel like he'll have a couple more fights. Hopefully he'll get the type of, exit that he wants, and then he'll be out of there. And I don't think he's getting singled out. I just think he's such a popular figure and he's polarizing, and, he's going to bring that kind of attention. But he's not training the way he used to train at all. Obviously, you can just tell by his camps who he brings in. He's not pushing himself. He's not bringing the kind of guys that I would say they're going to push him and make him a lot better.
Yes, man.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I think so.
So no Ido Portal over there playing touch butt with your buddy in the park. That might be
that was
my
best. That was the
favorite
best line ever. Yeah.
What was it?
Diaz
yeah.
brothers. Yeah.
Well, it was no, it wasn't Nick Diaz. It was
Nate.
Yeah, it was Nate
Nate,
Diaz. Looks,
yeah.
it was like, were you over there playing touch butt
Yeah.
with your weirdo buddy in the park?
Yeah, you were
Completely. And Ido Portal is a pretty amazing dude,
Yeah.
and literally just like that guy faded into anonymity.
I
He just
know,
disappeared.
So with the supplementation, he's got to take how many clean tests? before- Two.
Yeah.
Which is the separation in those in time? Is it like what, 60 days
I don't think there is one. I think that it can be,
back to back?
yeah.
random,
And then, and the UFC, obviously he's their biggest ticket. So as a promotion company, they're not going to risk him having a positive result and then being shamed for his career. And he's not going to risk that either, because otherwise people will question all of his prior fights. So I think that it'll happen at the right timing for him.
It's got to become. I mean, that timing has to be.
Yeah, and he did have a bad injury, so as we talked about earlier, there was probably reasons for him to supplement to get back to a healthy point in his life, and as long as he's clean when he's competing, then it's not a problem.
I mean, because there's a lot of stuff that you can take to help recover from an injury that's not necessarily, taking steroids, testosterone, whatever.
But Doc, he
But-
wasn't doing himself any favors with all these posing pictures, and he's like, on
His
Instagram.
face, you can see it in his
And
face.
he all of a sudden
Well,
shaved his beard and looked
I
like he put
understand,
on
and I'm
30.
not saying what he did or didn't do. I'm just saying if you want to recover from an injury, there's so many things on the ban list that it's really it's almost impossible to recover well. You know, like you can only have a certain amount of caffeine in your bloodstream for. I mean, there's so many limitations. Like, hey, I just broke my leg on kicking somebody. I want to like recover 100% because that's the most important thing to me. I'm going to take myself out of this. I'm going to travel. I'm going to do all
He's
sorts
a
of
party
stuff.
too. So
Yeah, but here's the thing: like
Well, you got a whiskey company, you gotta
like
done.
he's smart with
Yeah,
it. Like
right.
it's kind of like Gordon Ryan. Like all of a sudden taking all these like dude looks like he's getting ready for the Olympia, taking all these shirtless photos of him flexing, and then gets upset when people are calling him a steroider.
Yeah.
Like I don't know, maybe just don't take your shirt off, or if you do, like have your shirt off, make sure it's in like the form of like you in action, like just basically bringing in like a guy to shoot video of you with your shirt off, dude. Just like I think it just tints it. And you know what? Like the problem, and these guys don't realize, just like the NFL and baseball, when all of a sudden senators who don't want to talk about the fact that they stock traded and did shorts and all this other stuff, you know what they do to like smokescreen that? They decide that steroids in sports is what's killing kids. And then all of a sudden you get called for a Senate oversight committee because this is what's deterring America. The problem in America
Smoke and
is you know, performance enhancing drugs in baseball.
Lyle Zeta taught us that.
Well, the problem is, and I only know this, and I'll let you know, Lalo Zato didn't die from taking steroids and didn't die from whatever.
I know he died from a brain tumor.
No, he didn't die of a brain tumor.
AIDS.
Died of AIDS.
Yeah.
So he, they spun the brain tumor, but I also know the doctor, and he was like, he had AIDS, and he was too embarrassed to say I'm dying of AIDS, so they gave him a brain tumor.
Okay.
So that was but the shitty thing is he vilifies, oh, it's the drugs I took. No, it's the unprotected sex.
But in terms of opponents, is Mike Chandler locked in, or it could
like
be
it looks like it. I think that'd be a good fight. I mean, but Chandler, I mean,
Is
because
he a
he
bit over the
wrestled.
hill?
So if Chandler, if he wrestled, he would win. If he came out and was smart, but he comes out and he's like, I'm gonna just bomb and
But it isn't he kind of a little over the hill? Like isn't he-
Chandler,
isn't he
I think he's gotten
34?
hit way too much. He's
like,
probably early 30s, but his last 4 fights were just, I mean, he took
brawls.
serious damage.
Yeah.
So, you know, they probably are like, you're going to go do that with Connor, and it's going to be a great, you know, if he wants to go out that way. But I mean, he could win so many fights if he fought smart, like wrestled for the first round, tired everyone out, and then started brawling with them. But like instead of just going straight to just, you know,
Only the Diaz brothers can get hit in the face 5,000
Yeah,
times and not get affected.
Yeah.
I love that. Dude,
Whatever
it-
genetics those guys have is like, I don't know. It's
Dude,
like
they're
the
Central
freak-
Valley
they're
Fresno
freak
dudes,
shows.
aren't they from like Fresno or Modesto?
they're from Stockton.
Yeah, Stockton. Yeah,
Which
pretty
is
much.
not a
no.
easy time. Yeah.
Sean, I was going to ask you about the John Jones fight.
Yeah.
I unfortunately paid for it, which, like,
Yeah.
And to have that guy basically come out, he like tackles him, gets him in like up against the cage, tries to get him in a guillotine, can't. All of a sudden, comes back, reboots, and then gets him in another guillotine. I'm like, did this dude not train any jits? Like, how in the world does he get taken down like that, pinned into a cage, and gets caught in like a weird, like that's a movie or like a move that like, you know, maybe like a.
And John
fairly
Jones
decent-
wasn't even trying to take him down. Like that was a scramble that ended up with him on the ground.
And then he pins him against the cage, and the guy can't get off the cage. And he tries to stand up, and then the guy had his chin down on the guillotine, and then all of a sudden the dude lifts his chin. I'm like,
So his strategy was to slip to the outside, and then so he slipped to the outside, hit the right hand. He slipped his head to the outside, and he threw a little short punch that he used to spin to his back. So he threw a little shot to the stomach as he slipped to the outside, and then he pulled himself around him. And that was what he drilled. So that's like a really good strategy for him because he couldn't get in a kickboxing fight because even though he took 4 years off, his wrestling is like innate. So it's not going to disappear like his striking would. So he was probably hesitant. He was going to be awkward on his feet. So his whole strategy was to slip a punch, get behind him, which is the safest place to take him down. And
but
then
doesn't that guy know that?
you know, the problem is like he's a lifetime, you know, kickboxer. So he's going to be able to pick up some grappling skills, but it's not going to make up for a lifetime of wrestling. And he can't use his skills because his skills are striking. So if he steps in and commits to his right hand, he's vulnerable for that. So it's hard for him to win that. If John Jones went out and started throwing, he could have gotten knocked out, but he was just waiting for a commitment. And that right hand was a fully committed right hand, which he slipped he slipped and got right behind him, and then it was over.
Yeah, but like, I mean, wouldn't that kickboxer at least have had some like basic level? Like, he doesn't have to be a fucking black belt, but like, even if he's like a purple belt or a blue belt, like, you're not going to get submitted off of that.
The problem was when he got pinned, so his lower back was against the cage and he couldn't move. And when John Jones like hip heist over him, he was in an awkward position. When you get guillotine there, like usually you can move out of it, but the cage was actually stuffing him this way. So it's a weird place to get caught. And John Jones has really good submissions. You know, like talking to Tim about training with him, and he has really good submissions. So so I think he got caught in a position where he doesn't have enough experience, especially like in a big fight. He probably just panicked and tapped, you know. So maybe in training he could have gotten out of that, but then on stage where it's like everything counts, I think he froze. Yeah,
Unforgiving.
Yeah. So
let's go. One last question, guys, and we'll close this out.
This one's for Mike. If you could repeat some of it, just to fix the audio in here. But I read The Everyday Warrior. Thought it was good and had a lot of practical advice. I truly appreciate you writing it. But does it seem like you target the left, victimhood, especially obesity?
All right. So the question is, this guy read The Everyday Warrior. First off, thanks for doing that. Good practical advice, he said, and I appreciate that. But it seems like I'm targeting the left, victimhood, and obesity. I'm not. That's the farthest from the truth. That was first off, politics. I just have I'm not in that arena. I don't need to be. And so, I'm from the Bay Area, which is socially moderate. And yeah, maybe I'm fiscally conservative.
Where are you from in the Bay?
So we were in San Francisco since 1899. Family's been there a long time.
Like South San Francisco, or like
not South, but the Mission District.
Oh,
and Dad went to St. Ignatius. My mom went to Presentation, was back then. So
wow.
we moved down the peninsula towards Palo Alto, and then I went to high school in San Jose.
Okay.
Loved it. Loved the Bay Area growing up, man. It was a great place too. But to
Still
your
one
point,
of my favorite places in the world, and it's so sad what's happened.
And it is. Actually, my great uncle was the mayor, Joe Aliotto of San Francisco. And strangely, or funny enough, my grandfather was the lead detective of his bodyguard detail, because it was back when the Black Panthers.
So my mom worked for a architecture firm in Canada, and then they came down on a project in the 60s. And so she was their accountant, came down, and then my dad was a lobbyist and a lawyer. And so he was coming back and forth. And then, San Francisco was like, place. So that's actually where my parents
met. Yeah. No, San Francisco is a great city. It's going through some hardship right now, some serious hardship. But to this guy's point, no, I really don't care about someone's politics, and they shouldn't care about mine. What I talked about, victimhood, is a mindset, and that's what I'm talking about. And it's been exalted. Mental health has increased substantially, which I just had a great doctor on, Dr. Chris Palmer, who wrote a book called Brain Energy. He says, really, there's 3 buckets traditionally for metabolic diseases: obesity, diabetes, and heart disease. He said there should be a 4th, mental illness. He said mental illness is a metabolic disease, meaning what we put into our bodies. So victimhood, what we've seen is it's been exalted, even with veterans coming back, is, oh, hey, poor you, you've been exposed, you're a victim, it's not your fault. What I'm saying is that can be it's an epidemic. It can be contagious. And when you surround yourself with victims, you find comfort, and misery loves company. Ultimately, what we're talking about is a warrior mindset. A warrior mindset is not going to insulate you from hardship. I'm not saying that. It's still going to expose you to tragedy and hardship. What it does, and these guys are a living example of it, is it allows you to respond in a healthy and positive way. That, hey, some things are out of your control, but you control the majority of your outcomes. And I don't know if you guys agree or disagree. Most of the battles you fight in life are not you versus them or someone else. It's you versus you. And that's what I'm saying. Now, obesity, what I'm saying there, and if you don't think I have empathy for somebody who's struggling for weight, I struggled with my weight when I got wounded. When I got wounded in 2006, I started drinking every night, Jack Daniel's bottle, and eating McDonald's because I'm sitting in a wheelchair. And I went to 225, and at 6 foot, 225 is not a healthy weight. And it took me 2 years to lose that weight. And that was one of the worst periods of my life. I feel for these people, and I understand it's just, they need to implement a few practices to get out of that rut and start moving on the path to being healthy. If anyone says, it's almost like a woman saying, yeah, I love a dad bod. Like, yeah, come on. No.
I was kind of laughing about that dad bod thing, and then they started showing women pictures, and they the women thought the dad bod was Daniel Craig in
Oh, they
007,
but
where
he's ripped.
well, when he's getting
Yeah.
out of there, like he's standing there, and they're like, no, that's a dad bod. You can't see his abs, but his shoulders and everything look good.
Yeah.
So they went through and they were reviewing all these women, and like they showed him like Seth Green, and they're like, oh, that's disgusting. No, and then they showed him Daniel Craig. They're like, oh no, that's the dad bod. And I'm
Wrong.
like, I was like, so, like,
So
there
basically-
really aren't that many 50-year-old dudes walking around in that good of shape. But you know what? If you
Yeah.
find one, latch on.
So, but obesity, if you want to look at it from a medical standpoint, it is unhealthy and leads to a whole other subset of metabolic diseases. All I'm saying is
It is
you
a
can't be
metabolic
obese.
disease.
It is a metabolic disease.
You brought up a great point on like the pity party, like and it doesn't have to be soldiers. I mean, I know it's going to sound terrible. I don't hang out with a lot of ex NFL players because they love to sit around and talk about the brain damage and this and this. And part of the reason I like connected with Nick Hardwick and we get along so well is he's like, I'm not going to accept that. And then all of a sudden we're sitting with the brain thing and he's like, so legitimately you don't have to live with this. But he's like, I think what happens is people get stuck in this like, oh,
Exactly.
poor me.
Because we
And-
give
and
them
you're
attention,
talking about-
especially social media.
Well, but you're
Yeah.
even talking about NFL players that are like, played at like, this high level who just like, oh, I have a bad brain. I can't do it. Okay. I'm just going to sit around and be a potted houseplant smoking weed all day because that's how I manage my stuff instead of being proactive and trying to fix this shit, which at the end of the day is 100% fixable if you're willing to do the work.
And that's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Is there's so many stories if you look that people reach some level of obesity, and then after a year, 2, 3, are some of the fittest people you'll ever see, and their positivity, their mindset is drastically different from when they were in that rut. So, I'm not taking shots at anyone because I've pretty much experienced everything that I talked about. I was the victim when I left the SEALs and I ended up in Austin for 2 years, probably the worst phase of my life, darkest period of my life, because I didn't know how to process a lot of things. And in the ways I was victim. So no, I'm not taking shots at anyone. And again, thanks for buying the book. And I hope you found a nugget. Well, guys, we've been going at it. Again, every Friday, we're going to be holding these. We're going to be bringing guests on. Tyson Mendias couldn't join us today because he's on a family outing to beautiful Galveston Beach. Not to take shots at Texas. We're all in Texas. But please go check out Men's Journal for the latest in gear, health and fitness, food and drink, style, travel, and the Everyday Warrior. And please buy the book. The audiobook comes out on March 21st. It has about 30 minutes of exclusive content where I go off script to give people a little more context. There are subscriptions on the site that you can sign up where Men's Journal sends you some pretty damn good articles. And then check out the next episode of the Men's Journal Everyday Warrior with Brent Smith. If you guys don't know who Brent Smith is, he's the lead singer of Shinedown.
Nice.
We've got an invitation to go backstage and actually, so that whole band is clean.
Oh, wow.
They don't drink. They work out. They generate a new workout, CrossFit style, every day that they do before they perform. So they said, please bring the crew out. We'll get a workout together and then we'll do backstage.
Perfect workout.
But I'm like, well, backstage after the concert, are we then going to drink and have fun? So
We're touring
um,
movies.
yeah.
There's your workout. Have fun.
So additionally, go to the Apple Podcast for the Men's Journal Everyday Warrior and leave a review. I'm not telling you to leave a 5-star review.
Last time I went out with a band, I ended up splitting Chad Kroger and Nick from Nickelback's head clean open with a headbutt.
That's because you're a dick.
And then he tackled me. We broke a whole bunch of bottles and ended up basically bringing into a big melee.
Yeah. Well, and if we'll see if we can get Britt and the guys to just have a few drinks.
but
just a few drinks.
The guys from Nickelback, people rip on them. Those guys are like redneck cowboys from Canada and are the best dudes to hang around with. I had the most amazing time. Wasn't a Nickelback fan, and now I'm a Nickelback fan. So whenever people trash them, like, no,
It's
no,
not that bad.
I drank with him. We had an amazing time, and it ended in blows where like his eye was open and we were hugging, and he was like, "This was amazing," and I'm like, "Yo, dude, if I can get in a fight and there's blood and like you still have a good time, I'm excited." I'm a huge fan.
There's a similar story from some SEALs that party with the Patriots.
Yeah.
And one of the O linemen was like, "Throw a dart, man." He had his hand on the dartboard. Guy threw the dart, went right into his hand. Everyone was laughing. They had a good time.
Was it probably, well, that wouldn't have been Matt Light. That was probably Steve Neal.
It's also when the dog bit Brady. Did you ever hear that story?
But like
they told him not to pet the dog, and apparently Belichick said, "Yeah, that's my surfer quarterback."
Yeah. So Steve Neal,
He's a wrestler, right?
Yeah, he was a wrestler. He was like the dude who basically
Famous double leg.
yeah, but he's a savage. He was the dude that like Brock Lesnar never beat.
Yes.
And he like, I mean, so he misses the Olympics. I forgot the black dude that beat him out of the Olympics in the trials. So I can't remember, but he's from San Diego, wrestled at Bakersfield, and absolute
Good
savage.
program.
Um,
Good program.
He
Yeah.
decides, oh, I didn't make the Olympics. Let me go try out for football. And so the Patriots signed him to the practice squad. We signed him to our practice squad, and then he came, and I got to like hang out with him for 6 weeks. And I remember I was like trying to teach him some offensive line stuff, and he was like, "It'd be a lot easier if I just like stood up and like grabbed the dude and wrestled him to the ground." And I'm like, "You do you."
Yeah,
And
that's,
then-
that's holding, but
And-
yeah,
and
yeah,
then-
good
and then
on
the
you.
Patriots basically signed him off our practice squad, and he played 10 years.
No kidding.
Had zero, like he was a terrible football player. Had no idea, but unfortunately could just get in front of dudes and muscle them. Block him so fucking strong. I remember we were like doing drills, and I was like, he was my like, oh, you know, like happy to help him because he's both from California. And I remember we were doing stuff, and I was like, yo, dude, don't punch me that hard. Like, we're gonna have problems. But the nicest, best,
Yeah, they
dude
usually are.
Yeah, like usually the guys that wrestled, especially the heavyweights, are always like my buddy Matt, are just such amazing cats. So
Well,
I
it's the
enjoy
same
it.
thing about fighters. Like the most lethal fighters I've met, lethal warriors are usually the nicest freaking guys that will never fight out in town. But hey, guys, if you want any specific topics or guests on the show, send a message to @Men's Journal at Instagram. Happy St. Patty's Day. Drink responsibly. And Uber. There's no reason not. Well, unless you're in a small town and you don't have Uber, that sucks. I apologize. But drink responsibly. Have a safe night, and we will see you next Friday.